Ah, Elderbridge. Yes, a city of spires and shadows, many, many shadows, especially when the mists roll in from the fens. They have a way of clinging, you see, clinging to the ancient stones, clinging to the secrets buried deep beneath. I recall a particular autumn. The air was crisp, too crisp perhaps, as if holding its breath, waiting for something rather unpleasant. The wind, it whispered tales through the narrow alleyways. Tales best left unheard, most would say. But you're not most people, are you? No, you want to hear. The colleges stood like slumbering giants, their ancient windows like eyes, watching, always watching. The dons would scurry by, gowns flapping like ravens' wings. They spoke of dusty tomes, of forgotten lore. But some lore, my friends, refuses to be forgotten. It seethes beneath the surface, a patient, cold sort of anger, waiting for a crack, a weakness, a moment to rise. The very air in Elderbridge felt heavy that year, laden with unspoken anxieties, and the faint, faint scent of something old, terribly old, and not entirely at rest. It's the quiet places you must watch, the libraries after closing, the chapels in the dead of night, the little museums tucked away, places where the past is not merely remembered, but palpably present. You might feel a breath on your neck, a sudden chill where no draught could be, the rustle of unseen garments. These are the telltales, you understand, the overture to a much grander, darker opera. Elderbridge, for all its scholarly pursuits, had a very thin veil between our world and others, and so our story begins. Not with a bang, oh no, much too vulgar. It began with a sigh, a whisper, the turning of a brittle page, in a room filled with the ghosts of ambition, and the impending chill of a revenge most unusual. Remember the mists, remember the shadows, for they are characters in this tale as much as any soul, living or, otherwise. They set the stage, they hold the secrets, and sometimes they even take a bow. Now shall we proceed? I think we shall. Alistair Finch, that was his name. A bright spark, they said. Too bright for his own good, perhaps. He was a postgraduate, delving into matters best left undisturbed, at Elderbridge University's rather grand Department of Antiquities. He had a theory, you see, a rather daring one, about certain reanimation rituals found in texts others dismissed as fanciful or simply mad. Alistair, however, was not one for dismissal. He was a seeker, a digger, and he was on the cusp of something, or so he believed, with all his young, fervent heart. But brilliance, alas, often attracts envy, like moths to a rather dangerous flame. Two of his colleagues, Barnaby Thorne and Celia Hargrave. Oh, they were clever. In their own way, Barnaby, all bluster and borrowed confidence. Celia with a smile as sharp as a shard of obsidian. They saw Alistair's work, they saw its potential. Not for knowledge, mind you. Oh no, for advancement, their own. They pretended friendship, offered assistance, listened intently to his theories, his discoveries, his painstaking translations, all with a patience that should have screamed danger. The betrayal was swift and brutal, as these things often are. Alistair was to present his findings, a culmination of years, his magnum opus, he rather touchingly called it. But Thorne and Hargrave, they struck first, presented his work as their own, twisted his theories, mocked his meticulous research before the assembled faculty, the very people Alistair had hoped to impress. They painted him as a fool, a plagiarist even, using his own notes, his own insights against him. It was a masterpiece of academic villainy, cold, calculated, and utterly devastating. Alistair was ruined, or so they thought. His reputation shattered, his funding withdrawn, his spirit, they imagined, broken. He became a pariah, a whisper in the corridors he once walked with such purpose. The laughter of Thorne and Hargrave echoed, a cruel counterpoint to the silence that now enveloped young Finch. But they underestimated him, you see. They saw only the scholar, the dreamer. They did not see the iron core, forged in the fires of such profound injustice. They did not see the darkness he was now willing to embrace. A very different kind of study began for Alistair then. The university library held many secrets, more than the librarians ever knew, or cared to admit. Alistair, cast out from the gilded halls of his department, found solace, and something more, in the forgotten archives, the sub-basements, where the air was thick with dust and the silence was absolute. He wasn't looking for academic redemption anymore. Oh no, his quest had taken a far more personal turn. He sought power, a means to an end, an answer to the injustice that festered within him, a response that academia, with its polite debates, could never provide. It was there, tucked away, mislabeled, a slim volume bound in what looked suspiciously like human skin. It spoke of the Fenmire Crypt, an unhallowed place not far from Elderbridge, said to house a guardian, a silent watcher bound by rituals older than the university itself. Rituals Alistair now recognized from his own stolen research. The book detailed the rites, the incantations, the specific offerings required. It was a dark path, a terrible one. But the faces of Thorn and Hargrave, their triumphant sneers, they burned brightly in his mind, guiding his hands. He found the crypt as the book described, a place of cold stone, and even colder dread. The air hummed, a low thrumming, like a monstrous heart beating deep within the earth. Alistair was no fool. He felt the wrongness of it, the ancient power coiled there. But his resolve was a chilling thing. He had gathered the artifacts, the rare herbs, the specific tokens of his intent, and the parchment. A copy he'd made long ago, detailing the very ritual Thorn and Hargrave had mocked. He began the incantation, his voice surprisingly steady in the oppressive gloom. The shadows deepened, coalesced, a sound like dry leaves skittering across stone, then a deeper groan. From within the sarcophagus that dominated the small, damp chamber, Alistair did not flinch. He continued the words, the ancient, terrible words. He felt a pull, a draining, as if the ritual demanded a piece of his own vitality, and then, slowly, agonizingly, a desiccated hand, bandaged and brittle, gripped the edge of the stone coffin. The silent watcher of Fenmire Crypt was stirring, and Alistair Finch, he smiled, a grim, terrible smile in the darkness. The sentinel. It rose, not with a roar, but with a silence more terrifying than any sound. Tall, gaunt, wrapped in funereal linens yellowed with age, its eyes, or the hollows where eyes should have been, they seemed to fix upon Alistair, a cold intelligence, an ancient hunger. The air in the crypt grew colder still, almost unbearable. Alistair presented the tokens, small personal items he had acquired. From Thorn and from Hargrave, a silver pen, a silk scarf, offerings to focus the sentinel's attention, its purpose. Thorn was first. He was celebrating, naturally, at his favourite public house, the Gilded Quill, boasting of his triumph, his brilliance. The sentinel moved through Elderbridge like a whisper of grave dust, unseen, unheard by most, until it was too late. The sounds from the Gilded Quill that night, they were not of celebration. They were sounds of pure, unadulterated terror. Then, silence. A profound, chilling silence. The patron spoke of a sudden cold, a figure of shadow. And Thorn. Thorn was simply gone. Vanished. As if the fens themselves had swallowed him whole. Celia Hargrave met her fate in the hushed aisles of the university library, late one evening, reviewing her stolen triumph. Perhaps she felt a draught, or heard a rustle of ancient linen. The details are unclear. What is known is the scream. One single piercing scream that echoed through the empty halls. And then, like Thorn, silence. She too was gone, vanished without a trace, leaving only a lingering scent of dust, and a palpable sense of dread that clung to the bookshelves like cobwebs. Elderbridge began to whisper, fearfully. Alistair felt it, a grim satisfaction. Cold, yes, but satisfying nonetheless. The sentinel had done its work, efficiently, terribly. He had recalled it to the crypt, its purpose fulfilled, or so he believed. The pact was complete, the debt repaid. He felt a strange emptiness. The fire of his rage had banked, leaving behind only ashes and the chilling realization of what he had unleashed, what he had become. He was no longer just a wronged scholar. He was something more, something darker. And the sentinel. It waited patiently in its stone bed. News of Barnaby Thorne's disappearance spread like wildfire in a dry field. His older brother, Reginald Thorne, was not a man of academia. Oh no, Reginald was a man of direct action. Ex-military, some said, with a certain grim determination. He did not believe in fanciful tales, but he believed in his brother's fear. Whispers had reached him, of Alistair Finch, of occult practices, of a darkness stirring. Reginald was not one for subtleties. He wanted answers, and he intended to get them by any means necessary. He was a practical man facing an impractical horror. Reginald found Alistair not difficult. Alistair was adrift, lost in the aftermath of his terrible vengeance. Reginald didn't ask polite questions. He was persuasive in a rather forceful way. He bundled Alistair into a sturdy motor car and drove him out, towards the fens, towards the Fenmire crypt. Reginald had done his own research of a more pragmatic kind. He knew where the whispers led. He spoke of Barnaby, not with anger but with a cold, hard grief. He demanded that Alistair summon whatever had taken his brother. Under duress, Alistair complied. What choice did he have? Reginald Thorne was a formidable presence. The ritual was performed again, though Alistair's heart was not in it this time. The sentinel rose more slowly, as if reluctant. Reginald watched, his face a mask of grim resolve. He had come prepared. He carried a canister of petrol and a sturdy lighter. As the mummy fully emerged, ancient and terrible, Reginald acted, with a speed that belied his bulk. He doused the creature and the nearby sarcophagus, and then the flames, a hungry, roaring inferno. The sentinel shrieked, a dry, grating sound like stone grinding on stone. It thrashed in the flames, a horrifying spectacle. Reginald also seized the parchment Alistair held, the one with the ritual. He tossed it into the pyre. "No more," he growled. "This ends now." He watched until the mummy was consumed, until the parchment was ash, believing he had destroyed the creature and the key to its reanimation. He had faced the darkness, and in his mind he had won, a brutal, fiery victory against the shadows. Reginald Thorne stood amidst the smoke and the stench of burning linen and something else, something ancient. He looked at Alistair Finch. The young man was pale, shaking, but alive. Reginald felt a surge of something, not triumph, more like grim satisfaction and a profound weariness. He had avenged his brother, in a way. He had destroyed the monster. He had burned the accursed ritual. He had, he believed, cleansed the world of a small piece of its encroaching darkness. The firelight danced in his eyes, reflecting a terrible duty done. Now what to do with Finch? The thought of murder crossed Reginald's mind. It would be easy, so easy. Here in this desolate place, who would know, who would care? Finch was a dabbler in horrors, a summoner of nightmares. Perhaps he deserved such an end to silence him forever, to ensure this could never happen again. The flames crackled, as if whispering temptations. Reginald's hand tightened into a fist. The urge was strong, a primal need to extinguish the source of the evil, but Reginald Thorne, for all his ruthlessness, was not a murderer of men, not in cold blood. He had destroyed a monster, a thing, not a human being, however flawed, however dangerous. He looked at Alistair, saw not a master of dark arts, but a broken, frightened young man who had been pushed too far, who had made terrible choices. "Get out of Elderbridge," Reginald said, his voice hoarse. "Never come back. Never speak of this, or I will find you." It was a threat, but it was also a reprieve, a misguided act of mercy. Alistair scrambled away without a word, disappearing into the pre-dawn gloom of the fens. Reginald watched him go. He felt empty. He had stared into the abyss, he had fought it, and he had, he thought, spared a life. He turned back to the smouldering crypt, kicked at a charred timber. He believed he had contained the horror, that the nightmare was over. He did not understand the true nature of the game Alistair Finch was playing. He did not understand the depths of Alistair's cunning, or the true resilience of ancient magic. Alistair Finch did not flee far, just beyond Reginald's sight. He leaned against a gnarled, ancient willow, and he allowed himself a small, almost soundless laugh. It was a chilling sound, even to his own ears. Reginald Thorne, so confident, so brutal, so predictable. He thought he had burned the key, the precious parchment, the fool. Alistair reached inside his coat and drew out another scroll, the true ritual text, the one he had so carefully transcribed years ago, the one he had guarded, knowing its terrible, wonderful potential. The parchment Reginald had burned, a clever fake, filled with near-correct incantations, enough to summon, enough to seem genuine, but lacking the true binding words, the words of absolute control. Alistair had anticipated the possibility of interference, of someone trying to stop him or destroy his work. He was always one step ahead, even in his darkest moments. His intellect, once praised in academia, now served a far more sinister purpose. He was not merely a puppet master, he was the author of this entire dreadful play. And the Sentinel, oh, it was not truly destroyed, not by mere fire. Its essence was tied to the crypt, to the land, and to the true ritual. The flames had caused it discomfort, agony even, but its physical form could be reconstituted with the correct words and the correct will. Alistair possessed both, in abundance. He unrolled the true parchment. The ancient script seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. He felt a thrill, a cold, exhilarating surge of power. This was not just revenge anymore, this was mastery. He began to chant, softly at first, then with growing strength. The words felt familiar on his tongue, comfortable, as if he were born to speak them. He wasn't just re-summoning the Sentinel. Oh no, he was doing something more, something the original texts only hinted at. He was preparing to imbue new vessels. He had plans for Thorn and Hargrave. Their disappearances were merely temporary. An intermission. The true performance was about to begin, and they would be the stars, under his sole, unyielding direction. Reginald Thorn returned to Elderbridge, exhausted, but with a sense of grim closure. He poured himself a stiff brandy, stared into the fire in his study. The flames no longer seemed comforting. They flickered with the memory of the crypt, of the burning Sentinel. He tried to put it behind him, to believe it was over, that life, or what passed for it after Barnaby's loss, could resume some semblance of normality. He told himself he had done what was necessary. He had faced the darkness. He had prevailed. Poor, deluded Reginald, a few nights later. There was a knock at his door. A hesitant, almost timid knock. It was late, past midnight, a time when honest folk are abed. Reginald frowned. He was not expecting visitors. He moved to the door, peered through the spy hole. He saw nothing, just the empty moonlit street. Odd. He was about to turn away, when the knock came again, louder this time, more insistent. A shiver traced its way down Reginald's spine, a premonition, a sense of wrongness. He slowly unlatched the door. Standing on his doorstep were Barnaby Thorn and Celia Hargrave, his brother, and the woman who had aided in his ruin. They looked different. Their eyes were hollow, empty. Yet they held a cold, unwavering focus. Fixed on him, their skin was pale, too pale, with a faint greyish tinge, like old parchment or grave dust. They did not speak, they simply stood there, silent, accusing, a terrible parody of life. Reginald stumbled back, a gasp caught in his throat. This was impossible. He had seen the flames. He had burned the monster. "Barnaby," he whispered, his voice trembling. Barnaby Thorn smiled then, a slow, ghastly stretching of the lips. It was not his brother's smile. It was something borrowed, something cold, and utterly devoid of warmth. Celia Hargrave mirrored the expression, a silent, chilling chorus. From behind them, a new figure emerged from the shadows of the street. Stepping into the dim light of the porch, Alistair Finch. He too was smiling, a smile of absolute, terrifying triumph, holding the true parchment like a royal decree. "An encore, Reginald," Alistair said softly. "For you." Reginald Thorn could only stare. Words failed him. The brandy glass slipped from his nerveless fingers, shattering on the polished floorboards, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden dreadful silence. Barnaby and Celia stepped inside, their movements stiff, uncanny, like marionettes whose strings were pulled by an unseen hand. Alistair Finch followed, calmly, his eyes gleaming with an unnatural light. He surveyed Reginald's comfortable study, as if assessing its suitability for something Reginald dared not imagine. The air grew heavy, oppressive. They were so eager to return, Alistair mused, his voice a silken whisper. That carried more menace than any shout, so grateful for a second chance. To serve a higher purpose, he gestured vaguely towards the reanimated pair. They are quite obedient now, quite dedicated. Barnaby and Celia turned their empty gaze upon Reginald, a gaze that promised no comfort, no recognition, only a cold, relentless intent. The intent of the Fenmire Sentinel, channeled, refined, and now perfectly controlled by their former victim. What happened next in that study? That, my friends, is where the whispers become fainter, more chilling. Some say Reginald Thorne simply vanished, like his brother before him. Others speak of sounds, unpleasant sounds, that lasted for a very long time. And then a silence that settled over the house like a shroud. A silence that Elderbridge felt, deep in its ancient stones, a new, cold spot in its tapestry of secrets. Alistair Finch, it is said, was seen about the university again, quietly, resuming his studies, though what he studied now no one dared ask. And so the score was settled. Or perhaps a new one had begun. For such power, once tasted, is rarely relinquished. Elderbridge carries its scars, its silences, and on misty nights, when the wind sighs through the fens, some say you can still hear it, a faint dry rustling like ancient linen or the turning of a forbidden page. A reminder that some debts are never truly paid, and some vengeances, they linger, waiting, always waiting, for the next ambitious student, the next betrayal, the next chilling twist in an old story. Do be careful in those shadows, won't you?